Were there times in your life when you felt stuck, angry, sad, when you weren't getting along with people? So people could be rolling along, living their lives and doing their thing, and something lousy happens in their lives. And it could be a divorce, it could be a death of a loved one. It's great to be popular, it's great to get good grades, it's great to be great at sports, but you're not less lovable if you're not. And the ability to maintain a sense of I'm okay, I'm lovable, and I could be somebody and do stuff is something that everybody should feel, whether you are developmentally disabled or whether you're Albert Einstein. My father did all the things that a father should do to make sure that we had a good life. And you know why he did that stuff, meathead? So Michael's like, no, March, why? He says, because my father loved us, that's why. And how can a man who loves you be wrong?
If you are looking to learn more about the power of live video and how it could help you propel you or your business, join our Live Tribe group today and take the first 21-day challenge absolutely free. This program will help you to become more proficient in live video, but it will also boost your confidence, challenge your commitment, and allow you to become more authentic and transparent. Click on the link below and start your 21-day challenge and experience today. One of the best things about being the host of American Real is that each week I get to sit down with some amazing guests, and this week was no exception. I sat down with a longtime family friend, Alan Trager, who I've known since I was the age of 2. Al and I used to play catch in the streets, we would play basketball on the courts, and he was like an uncle to me, or a second father figure. He worked with my dad back in the early 1970s. They were both social workers at the Susquehanna Valley Home. Al then moved back down to the New York City area where his career took off. He became a therapist. He started working as a social worker at WJCS, which is the Westchester Jewish Community Services, helping all kinds of people in their community, from mental health to sexual abuse. And you're really going to like this episode. This guy is a great storyteller. He gives some great insights about some of the current events happening in our society today. So I encourage you to sit back, relax, as I welcome Alan Trager. This is American Real. I am Roger Brooks. My guest today is Alan Trager, who recently retired after 42 years at WJCS, a human services agency in Westchester County, where you served as CEO for the past 20 years. In 1982, you founded a program that dealt with child sexual abuse that became the Treatment Center for Trauma and Abuse, and recently was renamed to the Trager-Lemp Center. You served on the faculty of the graduate schools for NYU and Fordham University for many years, and you were a psychotherapist for 30 years. Al, you're also a good friend and a mentor. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Raj. Good to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you here. And I know you pop back into Binghamton a couple times a year, I usually get to see you for a little bit, and just love to know, what's it like for you coming back to the place where your whole career began at then Harper College, now Binghamton University?
So, I mean, I've been coming here. I tell my friends that I've been coming to Binghamton at least once a year since 1968. And I'm a New York City boy, Long Island guy. My connection to Binghamton started at college, but afterwards, you know, working at Susquehanna Valley Home, meeting your dad. And so this is partly coming home, just like going back to Long Island or New York City. So
Sure.
great.
Yeah, and then you just mentioned, you know, and for people that don't know, you did work with my dad early on in your career, and you guys many years ago. You played a major role in my life as a mentor and a trusted advisor and a friend. And
you played a role in my life because I needed somebody to play with.
That's right.
Your father sometimes, you know, didn't want to run around and play ball in the street or play basketball or softball, but I always had you.
That's
so
right.
It's great.
In those days of playing catch in the road and going down to the park and, you know, hitting and pitching and
it was great.
Playing basketball was fun.
Yeah, you were kind of a son, but not quite, because I was still only starting out in my 20s.
Right.
It was terrific.
Right.
I have great memories.
Likewise. So, if you don't mind, let's start with the psychotherapy part of your career. You were a psychotherapist for 3 decades, right? How does one become a psychotherapist? How did that intertwine with your career in general?
So graduated from college with a bachelor's in psychology. A lot of people graduate from college with a bachelor's in psychology, but I didn't know what the hell I really wanted to do. I worked at Susquehanna Valley Home and knew that in general that was a field I wanted to be in. I wanted to be in the helping professions in some form. Went to graduate school, got my MSW, and wanted to work at an agency where I could help people. I didn't know that I decided, I want to grow up and be a therapist. I just knew I wanted to learn how to be helpful to people, and I didn't want to work in residential treatment anymore. So I got this job at this place called WJCS. I was very lucky. I never heard of it. I sent out my resume, and they were at the end of the hiring process, which is good because you don't have to wait as long to find out if you get the job or not. They needed a guy. They had a lot of a lot of boys that were 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and a lot of female therapists. They needed a guy. Worked out pretty good, yeah. So I got the job. And I wanted to learn everything I could about how to be a therapist. So I was like a sponge. Teach me how to be how to do group therapy, child therapy, marital counseling, family counseling. And then I worked in the clinic, and I was off and running. And then over the years, I decided that that was the work I wanted to do. And initially, I only wanted to be a direct practitioner. I only wanted to sit with kids, adults, parents, what have you, and work with them. It was only years later that I changed my mind and decided that being an administrative nerd was okay also.
And as a therapist, what was your specialty?
I was pretty eclectic, actually. So I liked working with families, couples. I liked working with kids, older adolescents, kids in college that were trying to figure out what they wanted to do, what roadblocks they were facing, and try and help them navigate life's challenges. So I really did the whole spectrum. Little kids, old kids, grown-ups. I liked action, though. It was, for me, my personality was such that working with somebody that was in your face and right out there was probably more fun than a little kid that just wanted to draw. Mm-hmm. Love little kids that want to draw. Love hanging out with my grandchildren that want to draw, but in my role as a therapist, a little different.
So helping people, I'm hearing a lot of this, get people healthy. Why are people unhealthy? Where does it start? Is it, we often hear it goes all the way back to the deepest roots of our childhood. Is that what you've seen? Is that the case in most cases?
So in a way it's a simple answer, in a way it's a complicated answer. Just think of your own life. If I were to say to you, Raj, were there times in your life when you felt stuck, angry, sad, when you weren't getting along with people? Where does that come from? And it comes from lots of places. So people could be rolling along, living their lives and doing their thing, and something lousy happens in their lives. And it could be a divorce, it could be a death of a loved one, it could be problems at your job. But of course, as we all know and have talked about for years and years, early starts and how people start off in life build a kind of base that makes handling some of life's challenges maybe easier or harder. And so I think that's how I would look at it. That to the extent that one is fortunate enough to start off in a family that's loving and supportive, and an environment that's loving and supportive. You can have wonderful, loving, caring parents that don't have much money, and that could be a different source of stress and problems. So it's complicated, but starting off with good base makes, okay, come on, give it to me. Come on, life, give me what you got. If you feel empowered and supported and have sense of self-confidence and optimism, it makes taking on life challenges probably more dealable.
You mentioned environment there. How crucial is our environment? As far as, that foundation that's being set in our early years, where we live, our household, our parents, our extended family, all of that, how does that play into whether or not someone has a real chance in life?
So the answer is twofold. On the one hand, it matters a lot. A lot. If you're told, let's just start off being 1 year old, 2 years old. When there are people there that hear you when you cry and you have to have your diaper changed, versus an environment where you cry and nobody comes to change your diaper or to find out that you're hungry or what have you, your sense of what to expect starts to form, right? And so you have a sense of if I ask for something, and when you're a little kid you cry, that's how you ask, there's an environment that's going to respond to me. That begins to kind of set a tone for whether you can have a positive impact on your life and whether you can count on other people to help you. You can't articulate it when you're a little kid, but that's what it feels like. So as you move along, that really matters. Now, if, for example, you're unfortunate enough to have a parent that's struggling with drug abuse or alcoholism, if you live in a community that is violent and you're subject to racism, think about all the ways in which that can impact your view of the world and how supportive it is, and also your sense of optimism about whether you can really make your way in the world and be successful, particularly if the people in your family or environment have or have not been successful. Your role models and the people you see every day give you a sense of what the world is like and whether I'm going to grow up and be X or Y and whether I can. Here's the flip side of that. Somebody hearing that could say, I'm screwed. I didn't have any of that stuff. How am I ever going to? And that would be a bad conclusion.
Sure.
Because one of the things you learn, either as a therapist or just as a person, is how resilience matters so much and how people can overcome what you consider incredible odds, just based on their ability to access in them optimism and a sense of I can do this. So if the takeaway is, my environment was pretty crummy, I'm done, that's a bad takeaway, and that's not true at all. And actually, I don't know that we should divert to a discussion about your dad, but your father's a good example of it. He was a twin, and he grew up in an environment that was very different than his twin brother. And one would not have predicted necessarily, based on his early beginnings, that he would have a great life, or that he would be a loving, caring husband and a loving, caring parent and a loving, caring friend, based on his beginning.
Right.
He is all those things. So environment matters a lot, and that environment can include your family, can include your neighborhood, your friends, et cetera, but it's not the be-all and end-all of what's going to happen in your life.
And I guess as you're talking, I'm thinking about, I'm trying to put myself in both situations as an individual, and it all comes down to mindset, right? Because you could be brought up in a household that you have everything, but if you don't have the will, desire, mindset to reach your goals, then you may fail. And then vice versa, if you're born in an environment where you don't have that chance, but your mindset is strong, then you could have a good outcome.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's absolutely true. I guess the next question would be, what informs your mindset? Where does that come from? Are there some people that just have this sense of a kind of self-awareness or determination or strength that they just pop out on the earth and they have it?
Sure. Or maybe a mentor that pulled you aside. It might be a book that you've read. It could be any outside influence,
right? Too.
That I've sat with people here that have had those real life examples where they were struggling in life as a teen, early years of after school, but then they read a book,
right,
and it changed everything.
Right. So that's really interesting. To a certain extent, what you're describing is it's coming from you, but some event, some person, some activity accessed it in you. So it's both. That mindset was not necessarily set in stone from day one, but as you just described, you read a book, you met this person, and something connected. Now maybe at that particular point, you were able to hear it in a way you hadn't heard it before, or it connected to you in a way that hadn't connected before. So it's almost everything in life is multifactorial. It's rarely just one thing. People say, that teacher changed my life. And I think that's true. But I also think at that moment, at that period of time in your life, you were able to take in that teacher and allow that person to have that impact on you. So it's both. But it's humbling because sometimes you and I, the cameraman, anybody, can really have an impact on a person. And sometimes you're trying to, and other times it just happens. You don't even know you're doing it.
Right. As a therapist, do you believe that everyone has their own unique ability and quality within them?
So I've told you this story once before, so I'll say it again. Therapy, and by the way, lots of things in life can be therapeutic without having to be in therapy, right? Some of the most helpful experiences in your life and in my life did not come because I was talking to a therapist. So I want to be clear about that. But I think that, so my view of people in general is that we are all born with lots of good stuff. So the story, the analogy that I like to think of is when I was a little kid. You know me since you're 2 years old,
right?
And now you're 90, 91. So we've known each other a really
right.
long time. So I love sweets. I love ice cream and chocolate and all that kind of stuff. When I was a little guy, my grandmother used to make sponge cake, like pound cake. And as much as I love sweets, sponge cake is pretty plain.
Right.
I love that stuff. And I think it's because it was my grandma. I love my grandma. My grandma made it. It was delicious. Right? Now, truth be told, if she had put some strawberries in between some layers of sponge cake with some whipped cream on top, come on, that would have been better. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Or better yet, maybe some chocolate fudge or something in between the sponge cake.
Yeah.
Or the piece de resistance, right? Some Breyer's Natural Mint Chocolate Chip, or maybe Haagen-Dazs chocolate chip, right on top, hot fudge over the whole thing. Oh my God, right? So, when little Roger was born, and Alan was born, and Mike was born, we were born with our own sponge cake. Roger sponge cake, Alan sponge cake, Mike sponge cake. And our sponge cake was loving and lovable, period. Now, some of us have lots of toppings in our life. The hot fudge and the chocolate syrup, and it could take the form of you have a high IQ, you're very athletic, you're good looking, you're popular. Other people, maybe they're born developmentally disabled, maybe they're born kind of klutzy, what have you. Now, sponge cake, those toppings are not necessarily genetic. Toppings could also be having loving parents, being poor or not being poor. At the end of the day, the toppings are toppings. So for example, when somebody gets divorced or somebody dies in your life, you feel awful. And especially in a divorce situation, what's wrong with me? Or how come the kids don't like me? And you start to question your sponge cake. You start to question your okayness. When and it often feels like without that person, what am I? Without people telling me I'm terrific, I'm not. And the reality is, when people go to therapy, it's because they lost touch with their sponge cake. You never lose your sponge cake. You started out loving and lovable, and you're still ultimately a loving, lovable human being. Having toppings in life makes a difference. It makes life taste sweeter. It's great to be popular. It's great to get good grades. It's great to be great at sports. But you're not less lovable if you're not. And the ability to maintain a sense of I'm okay, I'm lovable, and I could be somebody and do stuff is something that everybody should feel, whether you are developmentally disabled or whether you're Albert Einstein. And being able to kind of have a sense of balance in your life and try and get as much toppings as you can is terrific without losing touch with your basic okayness. So on those moments when you're feeling low or unliked or I'm terrible at this, to be able to still hold on to your basic okayness is what we really try and help people feel and do, whether they're in therapy or whether it's your wife coming over and saying, your boss sucks, I still love you, you're terrific. Or you made a mistake, so you got a C and you wanted an A. And I wish you had an A also, but I still love you.
No, it's a great example. I could really relate to that, and I'm sure other people watching here, listening, can relate to that as well. I do think about, though, what about the person that's deeply angry or is, a criminal? And I'm just trying to think of a very bad situation. How does someone like that turn their life around to get back to their sponge cake?
Right. So, I think that, again, as I said before, life is multifactorial. There are lots of different factors that play into how people overcome potholes in their life. Sometimes potholes that they made. Sometimes
bad decisions.
Bad decisions.
Mm-hmm.
So you live with the consequences of making a bad decision or bad luck. So I think for a person who is really angry about stuff, they need to at some point recognize that they're really angry about stuff. And whether or not my barking at you is warranted, or whether I'm really angry about some other stuff and you're just an easy target. So people have to take some responsibility for recognition that something's getting in their way, and they may be getting in their way. Being angry, the other example you gave before, either being angry or what was the other?
Maybe a criminal.
Yeah.
Made really poor choices.
Yeah, really poor choices. So, okay, so I've just been sent up the river for armed robbery. Do I want my life to be like this? What were the things that led me to choose that? And at the end of the day, to a large extent, people have to look in the mirror and say, is this what I want with my life? And are there other options that I need to think about? Because at the end of the day, I want a different life. We started a program at WJCS years ago, and we did a partnership with Mary J. Blige, and so we were working with a bunch of young women, girls who had dropped out of high school and had a variety of issues in their lives, and they were coming back to this program to try and get their life together. And at the time, Mary was thinking she wanted to bring back resources to the Yonkers community where she grew up, and it faced lots of trials and tribulations, and wanted to provide some resources for girls like her that might not have been available when she was a kid. And I was talking to some of the girls that were starting in the program, and they all had the terrific attitude. I want to come back. I want to get my high school equivalency. I want to make something of my life. I want my parents to be proud of me. I want to be a good role model for my kid. I want to escape poverty. I want to escape bad choices. It all sounds good, and it is great. It's not that simple. So you bust your butt, and it's harder, by the way, to get a high school equivalency than it is to just stay in high school. It's harder. And they've made it harder and harder over the years. So you get that. And then you decide, am I going to go to college or not? Again, it's hard if you didn't have a great background in school to start out with. So you have to kind of make up for that. You know, you missed courses along the way that serve as a base. So it's even harder. What do you do if you have friends in the neighborhood that are making 3 times as much money as you are, doing things that maybe they're not supposed to do? It sounds good sitting here. It sounds just great. Well, you got to say no, because aren't you better off making $35,000 a year and doing the right thing than making $105,000 a year and doing the wrong thing? Yes and no. It's not simple. So I don't really feel judgmental about it. I kind of recognize that I could see people saying, I need more money. I get that. I think the question's going to become, is there a way for me to live my life in a way that makes me feel good, that meets my needs, that accesses the stuff in me that I want to look back and feel proud about, and at the same time is realistic. I mean, sometimes it's easy to kind of sit back and think, oh, if I was in that situation, I definitely would do blah, blah, blah. Life's not that simple.
Right.
Life is not that simple. So,
and that's why agencies like yours are so wonderful throughout our country, to be able to tap into those resources. And a lot of people don't even know they're out there. Right. So to be able to talk about it like this, to get the word out so, you know, people know that there are resources virtually everywhere that hopefully could help get them jump-started.
I totally agree. But I also think, you alluded to this before, I also think that availing yourself of people in your life, not necessarily agencies, finding people in your life that would be helpful, whether it's your teacher or you have a bunch of friends, but one of your friends is actually doing better in school, and one of your friends decides to get out of the party and go do what they need to do. So talking to that friend, talking to that teacher, getting good advice, or just venting to people that will be helpful to you is also important.
Yeah.
It's not only finding an agency, it's finding people in your life that can be helpful to you and can help you harness the stuff in you that you need.
Right, yeah, around here we call it elevating your peer group. And that's something I'm trying to constantly do. And you know, it does make a difference when you could latch on to someone who you respect, who you know you could pick up the phone and call. We don't have all the answers, and it's okay, right? So maybe it starts with one person, and then 2, and then maybe within 6 months there could be 5 new people in your life that you've elevated yourself to hopefully make progress in your own life, you know, to reach your goals.
No, I agree. I think that's a great expression too. I also think that you have to be able to talk to people that love you despite your pimples, despite your imperfections, that you can talk to about, oh man, I messed up. And you can talk to people who say, yeah, I've messed up too. This is how I get past that.
Yeah.
Getting older has its downsides. Like, I'd like to go back and play in the street with you, 30 years ago. I'm not as fast, I'm not as nimble, and all the rest. So it'd be nice to go back, right?
Yeah.
But one advantage to getting older is, there are more than one, I guess, but is you can go back and say, I really messed up, and it felt like the next day wasn't going to come, and it did. And I felt terrible about this circumstance. I was totally embarrassed, and how am I ever going to get past this? And I did. Mm-hmm. And having that in your reservoir of memories is great, because there's going to come a time, I don't know if it's tonight or tomorrow or next week or next year, where you and I are going to be, oh my God, this is awful. And being able to remember, all right, I've been here before, how do I get through this? The sun's going to come out tomorrow, is really, really helpful. It's terrific.
Yeah.
Because part of life is knowing that stuff happens, and how did you deal with it, and what did you learn from it? And it sounds good, oh yes, people, these bad things happen and all the rest. And that's really good. But at the moment that you're really in it, to be able to say to yourself, oh, this is bad. What have I learned in the past to help me manage getting through this moment, is really helpful.
But that's becoming mature within yourself as well, right? Taking that accountability to be able to even say those words, that I've made a mistake. I know for a long time in my life that wasn't in my mind. But then at a certain point it clicks and you say, okay, I need to progress. I need to mature. I need to be accountable for my actions. I need to learn from my mistakes so I don't do it again.
Right.
And by example, if you do that, you're helping others around you, whether it's your kids or friends that may be in your presence. So.
Yeah. So I used to say when I was working at WJCS, I hated to hear negative feedback about a program, about one of our staff, or about me. I hated it. There was only one thing I hated more: not hearing it.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear it.
Right.
I don't want you to tell me you don't like me and that I was mean, but I don't like it. I prefer I not hear it. But if I can hear it and know about it and then feel bad or get mad at you or whatever, but address it, then I can get over it and get past it.
Right. So just a couple more questions on this topic, and then we can move on to some other things. In the past, you've talked about the power of mom and dad in our lives and what that impact has on us. Can you touch on that?
So I can touch on it in 2 or 3 ways. We all know when we were growing up, kids, rightly or wrongly, say, oh, that guy's a jerk. That guy, oh my God, what a doofus. I can't stand that guy. Somebody's calling that person mom or dad. Mom and dad are incredibly powerful words. So I could be thinking my mother embarrasses me, my father's, oh my God, but you better not say anything bad about them. We imbue a real power to our mom and dad. And that's good for important reasons. I mean, for the first few years, that's all you got, man. You're completely right. But it's a magical word, mom and dad. In fact, one way that you can get into a fight with another person without cursing, without punching them, is to say something like your mother. Because how dare you insult my parents, right? We are very protective of our mom and dad, and we give them a lot of power. And when you are fortunate enough to have parents imperfect, right? They were kids that made mistakes along the way. We think of them as perfect because they're our mom and dad, but they're just people, right? But when you're fortunate enough to have people who are your parents that mostly are, as imperfect as they may be, loving, caring, supportive parents, that's great. It gets a lot more complicated when not. So there was an episode in All in the Family, which you're old enough to remember.
Sure, love that show.
That stayed with me for years and years and years. And All in the Family, we tend to think of all the stuff that Edith and Archie and Meathead and Sally, what was her, I forgot, Gloria.
Gloria,
right.
That's right.
We remember all those episodes, but there's one episode in particular that relates to this issue. One time, Michael, Meathead, and Archie were working, at one point in the series, Archie had a bar, or he was working in Kelsey's bar, I think. And they went downstairs to get some stuff to bring up, and the door closed, and the store got closed. And so Meathead and Archie were stuck downstairs in the basement all night long. It's the basement of a bar.
Right. Drinking.
So they're getting happy. And so there's this moment between Michael and Archie that was a pretty unusual moment, because they're a little inebriated, right? They're a little drunk, and so they're talking. There's kind of a warmth, and they're enjoying the conversation
That we haven't seen up until that point, right?
Yeah,
Not
you didn't
too
get
often.
too much of that,
Right.
right? There wasn't softness between the two of them most of the time, and now there is. And at some point they're talking, and Michael's saying this, and there's a kind of a touching, loving moment going on. And Archie says something about, yeah, well, you know, the Dagos and the Spics and the Jews, like terrible words, right? And so Michael says, we're having a good moment. We're having a really, why do you have to talk like that? Why do you have to use words like that? In fact, I don't think they'd let you use words like that on TV now. And Archie goes, what are you talking about? You make a big deal about all that stuff. He goes, so Michael says, but you don't have to use words like that. Why do you have to talk like that? We're doing fine. And he goes, well, my own father used to use words. It's not the end, it's not a big deal. He says, well, did you ever think, Archie, that your father was wrong? Complete quiet on the set. And you can feel the emotion of the moment. And Archie does something like this. He goes, wrong? My father wrong? You didn't know my father. My father busted his butt. He worked hard. He went to work early in the morning and stayed till late at night to make sure that he had enough money to take care of us. My father did all the things that a father should do to make sure that we had a good life. And you know why he did that stuff, Meathead? So Michael's like, no, Arch, why? He says, because my father loved us, that's why. And how can a man who loves you be wrong? It's powerful. Wow. It's powerful. So we tend to feel like, no, if our father loves us and we love our father, they got to be right.
Yeah.
No, they don't. I could still love my father, and my father could still love me, and he could be wrong, or I could choose to go a different route. So the power of parents is pretty neat and pretty overwhelming, and sometimes a little scary.
Yeah.
The reality is that our ability to it's so powerful sometimes that, going back to the sponge cake thing, if your mom and dad don't say they love you, you question your sponge cake. Because you figure if your parents don't love you, then maybe you're not lovable. Right? That's a sponge
Question
cake thing,
yourself.
right?
Yeah.
The reality is, in real life, it's a shame that your parents don't see the love, the sponge cake in you, the lovability in you. But it's really hard to feel that. Because if you're not getting that early on, it's really hard to hold on to your sense of lovability. Power of parents.
Yeah. Wow. Thanks for that example. I mean, puts it all into perspective.
Yeah.
Is the nature of therapy itself shifting in any way that you've seen since you started?
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about it. It's kind of funny. For me personally, Since the last 20 years, I was an administrative nerd. I was a CEO, and even before that, I had other administrative jobs. When I think about my career, the last part of my career wasn't as a therapist, but of course it was what I did for a long time, and it becomes a part of you. In terms of the world of therapy, both as a therapist, but also as an administrator that oversaw an agency that saw changes over the years, a lot has changed over the years. When I first got into the field, when I first met your dad in 1972, first of all, the level of the amount and the impact of medication, very different. Many people were in psychiatric hospitals because they couldn't be maintained outside of a hospital. Nowadays, there's lots of different medication, and the use of medication, even ECT, electroconvulsive therapy, shock treatment, is much more sophisticated than it used to be. So there are more tools in the tool basket to help people navigate life and manage day's stresses, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one little piece. Number two, sticking with medicine for a minute, there were probably lots of psychiatrists back in the 70s that felt like using medicine was a little bit of a sign of failure, that somehow or other, if you had to resort to medicine, you'd failed. That whole notion has changed a lot. Mm-hmm. We recognize that like having type 1 diabetes, you're born with diabetes, is having insulin is not a failure.
It's a deficiency in your body.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. So that's a big change. Mm-hmm. Another change that's occurred, in the early days, we always talk about Freud and psychoanalysis and going to see a therapist 2 or 3 times a week and lying on the couch and talking about your feelings, and that's changed a lot. I think that, and some of it may relate to the way our society in general has changed, but now we're much more outcome oriented. And so rather than spending years and years talking about how angry you were at your mom or your dad, not that that doesn't matter at all, but really thinking about, wait, this is where I get stuck. What do I need to do to think about getting unstuck? And how can I change my mindset about this stuff? Where do I get stuck in my thinking that leads me down this road to get angry, or leads me down this road to get depressed, or leads me down this road to turn to a drink? And how can I rethink that? Not necessarily change the wiring, but maybe tinker with the wiring or suggest an alternative wire. So that's very different. It's more solution focused. It's more of a pragmatic approach. Doesn't mean some of what we learned in the early days doesn't matter, but the focus has shifted somewhat.
Mm-hmm. I could see that. Progress.
Yeah, progress.
Progress.
And change.
Sure. So you have 2 amazing children, Cheryl and Michael, and they now have their own families, and your 4th grandchild is on the way.
Yeah.
And as I was preparing for this interview, I couldn't help but think, as a therapist, how did that impact the way you raised your children? So did that intertwine with the advice you would give, with the way you would approach normal things that happen with kids? So, I think about sometimes I just don't know how to handle a situation.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, if I had training like you did,
right,
that's a great thing. And did you ever give that any thought?
So it's a great question. I just have 4 or 5 different thoughts, which is going to be a problem because I'm going to forget part of your question.
That's okay.
As I digress, we'll come back to that. So one quick side, and then get me back on track if I get off track. One of the things I say to my friends, and I may have said this to you and Sabrina when you guys were getting ready to be parents. Being a parent and being a grandparent is heaven. It's the greatest. It's the greatest. And there are things about being a parent and a grandparent that you just can't know until you're in that role. You just can't. And there are things that you feel as a parent and as a grandparent that are just so delicious and so wonderful. There's a little problem. There's a flip side to that stuff. So I remember saying to people that were pregnant, right, the couple, be prepared for the fact that you're going to feel inadequate sometimes, frustrated sometimes, mad at your kids sometimes. Your watch doesn't matter. You might as well throw it out because you have a watch now, but when that kid's born, I don't have to tell you this, they cry when they cry and they want to get fed when they want to get fed, et cetera, et cetera.
You definitely told me this.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So there's something really humbling about it, but I kind of feel like people also ought to know, everybody talks about it's great being a parent. There's a flip side to that, so don't feel terrible when you don't know what to do. When you're sitting there and saying, I should know this. I should know what I'm supposed to do because good parents know what to do. You don't sometimes. And your kid doesn't stop crying and you feel inadequate and stupid and all that stuff. So let's put that aside. I think the answer is yes. Being a therapist probably informed me being a parent to a certain extent in a couple of ways, and then I want to say another thing. Some of my mentors in my life were the people I helped. So people come to me like I'm going to be helpful and that I'm going to know stuff. And I can be helpful and I do know some stuff. But I see people that have incredible courage, incredible resources, are incredibly resilient, that got stuck. Being a therapist is in some ways a little bit of a, what's the right expression I'm thinking of? It's a deal. It's kind of like you pay me to help you access the stuff that you already have in you. And I get paid for that. Not only that, I learn stuff from people I help. So yes, being a therapist and learning, knowing a little bit more about the development of kids and what kids need, did that help me a little bit? Probably did. I don't know that I thought about it, but it probably did. But being a therapist and learning from some of the people I helped also helped me be a better.
Because they may be sitting in this chair telling you about a situation that you guys are talking through and an outcome that you might be able to use in your own life.
Sure, absolutely. They may have been stuck about this, and maybe I can help them see another way to do it. But in describing this situation, I also see, wow, that's pretty neat that they were able to do that.
And it could have prepared you.
Absolutely, and it kind of goes in here.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you another way I learned how to be a parent. And in a way, this is kind of funny. I was going to say embarrassing. I'm not really embarrassed by this, but I guess maybe I am a little bit because I'm saying it, right? As you know, my favorite TV show probably of all time is Andy Griffith. And the two things I learned, the takeaway from Andy Griffith was, it sounds funny saying it, but if you know me, you know this about me. One of them is of course Barney. And Barney is just funny as hell, but also I always remember about Barney when he thinks he's got it all done, right? He goes, oh yeah, I got this beat. I really got this. Oh yeah, he's got it. He knows what he's doing. He's smart. It always reminded me to be humble as a parent and as a person. Like when you think you got the world, that's fine. You should be comfortable. You should celebrate your successes. You should feel good about yourself. But don't be thinking that, oh yeah, I'm the greatest, I'm the best, that's number one.
Because it always came back to bite them.
Always came back to bite them, and it's a funny way to do it, but it's a good thing to remember. But now we'll get to the parent thing. The second thing, which is really the more important thing, is I wanted to be a father like Andy Griffith. So as much as I laughed during Andy Griffith, if I start to describe a couple of the little stories in Andy Griffith to you right now, I'll start to cry. Because what I used to see in that, and I still see it, the warmth and love between those two, Andy and Opie, and their humanness, the mistakes that they made when Andy would jump to conclusions about something with Opie and then realize, oh my God, what did I do? And so, there were times when that would seep into me, and I would hope that was in me as a father, to support your kid, to discipline your kid and say, no, you can't do that stuff, and there are rules and all that stuff, seeped into me. I think I actually consciously think about it more today than I did growing up. So my kids might say, yeah, I wish my father had remembered some of that stuff when he was, when I was little. But so yes, as a therapist, I learned some stuff, but you learn stuff in so many ways, and it could be TV shows and or seeing, colleagues or friends and how they relate to their kids, and you say, that's good. I need to.
And it's funny you say that, because these types of situations happen all the time, and I try to catch myself, because there's been several times where my daughter or my son was 100% right, and I jumped to a conclusion.
Right.
And so you try for the next time for that not to happen, because you make them feel bad and then you feel bad.
Yeah.
So that's a great lesson, and that's being a great parent, is knowing that you're not always right.
Right.
You have to look at the whole picture.
Right. But it's complicated, because
It
both
is.
you and your kid, even though your kid says he doesn't want you to always be right, you both want your parent to always be right, because you want to feel like you got the best parent in the world.
Right.
And they always tell you the right stuff.
Yeah.
And we don't, and we're not. And so finding that balance.
Yeah. So let's shift gears just a little bit. You worked at WJCS for 42 years, CEO of the last 20, as we talked about earlier. Tell us a little bit more. I know you described it a few times in different situations here, but tell us more about that agency and what an agency like that does and the impact it has on the greater community, because it's a great story.
So I'm very proud of WJCS and the time I spent there, and also the kind of place it is. I do want to say that there are lots of places like WJCS in
All
every
over.
county, in every
Yes.
state. So our particular agency was a little complicated in the sense that there are many agencies out there that are mental health agencies and focus on clinics and other kinds of psychiatric care and care management and various forms of mental health kinds of things. We were that. We are that. There are agencies out there that work with the developmentally disabled and intellectually disabled population. A lot of the ARCs throughout the state and the country, and other UCPs. And we have a lot of group homes for the intellectually and developmentally disabled people also. So sometimes there are agencies that just do mental health. We do that. Sometimes there are agencies that just do work with intellectually and developmentally disabled. We do that. There are some agencies that are more community focused, that have a variety of early learning programs, or centers for LGBTQ youth, or programs that go into schools and help kids that are either in domestic violence, parents have family issues, or pregnant and parenting kids and keeping them in school. We do that too. There are some agencies that provide home care. I've fallen and I can't get up. I need somebody at home to. We did that too. So we're a little complicated in the sense that we did all those, and we still do. I say did. When you retire,
Right.
sometimes you think that the agency's not there.
They're
No,
still
I'm
there.
not there. The agency's doing great without me. So, which gives me mixed feelings, by the way. So, no, I'm only kidding. I'm really happy, and they are doing great. So, as an agency, we did all those things, and we were just in one county, just Westchester. So we were, a pretty significant player in part of the community fabric, and we really tried to be as helpful as we could to all those kinds of populations and address all those kinds of problems.
And did those divisions, were they there from the time you joined, or were they added as time went on?
Well, this is good. You're trying to build my resume a little bit. This is great. This is great.
I don't know. I don't
Okay.
know.
Yeah. No. When I joined the agency in 1976, I think our budget was a couple $1 million, and we had some mental health clinics, and we had some home health care. Over the years, we grew and developed, and when I left a few months ago, we were much larger. Our budget was in the $45 million, and we had taken on. There was a period in the 70s where Geraldo Rivera and the Kennedys were investigating the warehousing of developmentally disabled people. In those days, they used the term mental retardation, and they said, we're just warehousing these people, and it's terrible. We should begin to develop homes in the community that are going to be a much more appropriate way to take care of, but more than that, help folks thrive, not just survive in the community. So we got into that field and we developed 13 group homes, for example. Then we also, during the period of the 80s and the 90s, we developed a lot of community-based programs like starting an LGBTQ center and early education programs and things like that. And then of course, in the early 80s, as you know, I got involved in developing the Child Sexual Abuse Treatment Center. So lots of programs got developed. And some of that was just as the world evolved, an agency needed to grow with it. And a recognition by society that we need to fund programs, and us raising our hand and saying, if we can be helpful doing that stuff, we'd like to do it.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
I had a good gig. It was fun coming home at night and looking in the mirror and saying, I went to work and I got paid to work and we did good stuff.
Yeah.
We help people. It's a good feeling.
Yeah, and I'd like to focus in on the treatment center for trauma and abuse for a moment, if we can. They renamed it the Trager-Lemp Center.
Humbling. It was really great.
I'm sure, and an incredible honor.
Really humbling.
So how has that agency, because you started that in '82, and I know it went through a couple of iterations to where it is today.
Right.
How has, if we could just look at that specifically, how has a department like that changed between then and now?
So in 1982, people didn't really talk about child sexual abuse much. It just wasn't talked about. Doesn't mean it wasn't occurring. Unfortunately, the numbers were and are much higher than people think of. I don't know, if you ask me today, I couldn't give you the exact number, but I'm going to be conservative, and tell you that 1 in 4 girls, 1 in 5 guys, 1 in 7 guys, 1 in 6 guys, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Much higher than one would think.
Much higher, experience some form of sexual abuse along the way in their lives. People don't talk about it, so you don't know it. So you say, well, wait a minute, I know 20 people. And those, what Traeger just said, actually what Traeger said is accurate. And I remember when we first started the program, I would go around and do grand rounds at a psychiatric hospital, talk about this stuff. If I were in the audience, and I would say this to people, if I were in the audience with you guys, I'd say, this guy's got his program, so he's got to, say how it's important. Because, it's this program. I'd go, listen, I'm going to give you the most conservative numbers I can. A lot of people would say that the numbers are higher. But why bother? They're still shocking. So I don't have to convince you with bloating numbers. I'll give you the most conservative numbers because it's shocking. Yeah. It's shocking. So we just started, at the very beginning, it was just an incest program. And then over the years, we expanded to beyond just intrafamilial kinds of sexual abuse. And it became much larger in scope, and it included other forms of trauma and all the rest.
And did it go beyond children as well?
Yes.
To adults? Okay.
Yeah. Even at the very beginning, although we talked about child sexual abuse, we always worked with adults who had abused when they were younger.
Right.
And in fact, early on, we had groups for adult survivors of people who had been sexually abused when they were younger and had the symptoms, consequences, impact on their lives as adults. And I have a feeling that we may wander into some current discussion about people that were sexually abused when they were younger, and whether it's the Kavanaugh hearing or whether it's even the Sandusky stuff and all the rest.
Or the Catholic Church.
And the Catholic Church. So we can talk about all that stuff. But in the early days, it was really about talking about it, just recognizing that this stuff exists, and that clinicians need to raise this as a possibility in their work with people. So if somebody comes in and they're depressed, depression can come from all kinds of things. It also can come from prior experiences that they never talked about, because people didn't talk about it. Therapists didn't necessarily ask about it. People didn't talk about it, didn't have TV shows about it. We are just about to celebrate the 20th year of Law and Order SVU. There was no SVU kinds of stuff going on in those days. And so a lot has changed in the last 36 years in terms of public discourse about it, recognition that it happens, Child Protective Service agencies being better trained and better schooled about how to address the issue. A lot has changed, and early days, just getting the word out, talking about it, saying we need to talk about this stuff. As time changed, we need to be more sophisticated about how we intervene, what causes it, are there ways to prevent it, different techniques and approaches to help people who have been abused get over it. Get over is not really a good way to put it. Address it, and get less handcuffed by it. But also reinforce it occurred, it wasn't your fault. You know, think of child sexual abuse there are some unique qualities to it. Every, bad thing, all kinds of bad things can happen to people for all kinds of reasons. So I'm in no way suggesting that this is worse than this, but for example, adult rape, horrible, terrible. It's an abuse of power. Child sexual abuse, abuse of power. Let's start there. It's abuse of power. And it takes a sexual form. But very often in adult rape, there's a threat. You put your hand over the person's mouth, you have a knife, you have a gun. Child sexual abuse is much more pernicious. Typically, a little kid knows the abuser, and the abuser takes advantage of their relationship and finds a way to shift from we have an okay relationship into an unacceptable relationship. But it's complicated because if you're an adult and were sexually abused and there were no guns and there were no knives and you weren't forced, well, did he do a bad thing? And if I think it's a bad thing, well, did I want it? Or how come I'm not self-protective? There's all kinds of complicated issues that go along with this. So it's not under threat of force, it's about threat of loss of love or getting in trouble, self-blame. It's a complicated kind of scenario that leaves people questioning themselves, questioning their right to be angry, and then without typically witnesses and corroborative evidence, it's he said, she said. Mm-hmm. And why will people believe me? And if it's somebody that you knew and liked and still may like, there's maybe a person that's been good to you and nice to you, but also has this significant problem in their lives, going to get them in trouble. Aside from whether people will believe me, if they do believe me, I'm going to think on somebody I know and like. So it's hard, yeah. Very hard. It's hard to come forward. Lots of times people will say, well, why don't people come forward right away and talk about this stuff? Having had experience over the many years with lots of different cases, I'm amazed that people come forward as much as they do. There's a lot on the line. It's embarrassing. If you go away and come home and your house has been robbed, you say, oh my God, I got to call the cops. The cops may ask you, did you have an alarm system or did you leave the door open? But it's not your fault. This is a whole different ballgame with sex abuse. Well, what kind of skirt were you wearing if you're an adult? Well, wait a minute, did he threaten you? Did he, if you're a little kid? Plus, people start to think about, well, what did he do? So they're now talking about your private parts. It's so much harder to talk about, so many mountains to climb to talk about this. And then you get interviewed about, if it was sexual abuse, about the most intimate details. Well, did he take off your underwear? Was there any wet stuff? Did you see any, how did it feel? It's so invasive. Why put yourself through that if you don't have to? It's very, very complicated. So there was such a need to have programs like our program and others to begin to address that stuff, to help people sort it out, to help people recognize it wasn't about them, to legitimize their right to be self-protective, to help them not get angry at themselves because they didn't prevent it, to help them not get angry at themselves because they didn't report it to the police. And then the whole issue of, so now what do you do? Do you want to, because it becomes an illegal issue, it's not just a mental health issue. Do we want to prosecute this person? And are you going to have to testify? And so again, going back to SVU, you see some of this get played out all the time on TV.
Right.
And I think they do a pretty good job of it, actually. I think Mariska Hargitay and her crew have done a really
For sure.
done a real service.
Yeah, it's a great show.
And by the way, well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No.
No, I was going to launch into the whole issue of allegations and whether they're believable and all that stuff. But
Right. No, and that's why I wanted to go into talking about a couple of real world issues right now. First, if we could touch on the Catholic Church. And obviously we could spend a whole hour talking about that. But my question is, if you were advising them as a therapist, what would you tell them to do?
So, typically, the kind of abuse that's being discussed in the newspaper is very similar to child sexual abuse in the following way. The abuse is occurring between people who know each other, have a relationship with each other. One person has power and is abusing it. Typically, it's not guns, it's not knives. And so it's a very confusing scenario. But again, the common denominator, somebody abusing trust and power.
Mm-hmm.
Next, and we talked about it a couple of minutes ago, getting people in trouble that you don't necessarily hate for other stuff. You know, it's easy if there's a clear villain. That guy's a terrible human being and he came into my house and accosted me. It's not that simple. It's not that simple. There may be ways in which you not only recognize that this person has good stuff, but that there were parts of your relationship that were good and that you learned stuff from this person. And getting them in trouble is complicated. So the first thing I would do is, first, and I'm not suggesting that I know more about this than anybody else, but thoughts that I would have is helping people that are in a position to do something about this now, because we're talking about 2018, recognize what's going on here. Next, it's easy in hindsight to get really angry at people in power that didn't do what they should have done when they heard it occurred. And by the way, and I'm not taking a position about Joe Pa at Penn State, but the issue about, well, if people reported stuff about Sandusky, why didn't people do stuff? They should have. The Catholic Church should have. So let me be clear and unambivalent, unequivocal about this. They should have. But people also need to understand, even though in the end of the day you need to do the right thing, and you should not have taken a priest and moved him to another place. You shouldn't take a teacher and move him to another school. Sandusky should have been reported right away. All true. But I do understand how hard it is to do that. If you've known somebody all these years and see all the good stuff that they do, it's not that simple. It's not that easy to turn them in. If you've respected that person, they've been good to you. They're good to the church. They've been good to the school. They've been mentors to football players. And you like them personally. It is hard to report them. It is hard to recognize that when you do that, their career, their family, how people view them, down the toilet. I get all that. It's really hard. And people should understand it's really hard to do that. But you got to do it. And what you have to do is say to yourself, my caring about this person as a coach or as a priest or as a Monsignor matters. It's not like and it actually makes it harder for me because I don't want to believe that it's true that you did this. But the greater reality here is the impact on this kid, this impact on this brother or this priest, on this nun, what have you, on the kids that were at school. And so as much as I still care about you as a person and I want to be supportive of you, I've got to report you. Now, I want to be as helpful as I can. So I would want to say to the person, you know, if I found out you did something, I've known you since you're 2 years old. I love you like you're like my nephew. I don't want your whole life to be terrible. So, but if you were, God forbid, I'd hate to do it because it's, you know, it's too upsetting to think of you doing this, but if you did something terrible to one of your kids or to one of the kids on the Little League team, I'll be as supportive of you as I can, but the truth has to come out. So, you know, I'll support you through therapy. I'll talk about all the good stuff that you bring to the table. I'll try and help you in any way I can to get past your problem. But we can't escape the reality of the truth. Although I understand how easy it would be to do that. So I can see how authorities in the church or authorities at Penn State, or there are lots of other examples, could try and find ways not to believe this or to kind of minimize it. I can see the temptation to do that. I really can, but you have to find a way to get past that and say, okay, but we got to do the right thing. Yeah. And the right thing here is that person abused power, abused trust, did really crummy, bad, terrible, horrible things to that person, whether they intended it to be, you know, in their head they may not necessarily think it's horrible, but it's all about them when they're doing, you know, sex abuse is all about the abuser. Yeah. There's nothing to do with it. You can convince yourself that it's not terrible and I still like you. It's all about the abuser. It has nothing to, it's a completely narcissistic act, right? Mm-hmm. And we owe it to them to do the right thing, and particularly in the context of the church and, you know, all the wonderful things that religion and church can bring. You just have to recognize the greater good and do it. And then find ways to be helpful and supportive of the people that did it, but in the context of the truth and honesty and being public. And I don't know that public means to be public, but being public. There's no way around that. And I think that we have a long way to go in all of our institutions to do a better job of it. There was a story, there was an incident that occurred at an institution like mine where somebody walked in on a colleague who was being inappropriate sexually with a client. And the person reported it to their supervisor, and it got reported to the police. It's exactly the way it's supposed to occur. It's terrible that it occurred, but you know, the definition of a great organization is not an organization that nothing bad ever happens. Bad things happen in the world. People do bad things. People do inappropriate things. It happens. You can have the greatest hiring process in the world. You could hire a big brother or a little league manager or a staff member that does a bad thing. Doesn't make the institution bad. What really good institutions do is handle that bad thing correctly. And in that situation, person reported it, went to the supervisor, went to the cops. Terrific. That's the way it's supposed to be. What I think, from my point of view, what really makes it terrific is that person who, this is a real incident that I know about that occurred at an institution. The person who reported his colleague, they were friends for years. Mm-hmm. He liked and respected his colleague. His colleague was never going to like and respect him ever again, and was going to hold him in contempt and say, "You're ruining my life. How could you do this?" Right? I really appreciate not only that they did the right thing, but the courage that it required to do the right thing. It requires courage to do the right thing.
But it also sounds like swift action is important.
It is.
Not to sit on it, not to, you have to make a decision quickly before more harm might be done. Yeah.
Plus, there's a victim.
Sure, that's right.
It legitimizes and empowers and concretizes the reality of the truth. Mm-hmm. And so then, you know, then try and do what you can because you still care about this person that did this bad thing. Okay.
Yeah.
But that's a different issue.
So, quickly on the Supreme Court, Brett Kavanaugh. Quick take on that.
And I got to be a little careful here because it's so controversial. So I'm going to.
But it's tough. I mean, everyone's sitting at home saying, "What? Who do you believe?"
So this is my take on it. And I hope that anybody who's watching this that feels really strongly in favor of Brett Kavanaugh will hear me to the end And I hope that anybody who's watching this that feels really, really strongly in favor of Dr. Ford will hear me to the end. My experience, and most people's experience, whether they're clinicians or prosecutors or lawyers, I think virtually everybody who's had experience in the field will say what I'm about to say. The overwhelming majority of times, credible allegations are true.
Okay.
But remember what I just said, people anybody who's listening to this, the two people that heard that I was on this and wanted to actually listen to this, listen to the end. Listen to the end. Overwhelming majority of times, credible allegations, not some silly thing, I said blah, 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 and there's no anything to it, but something that has some. Remember what I said before, it's really not an easy thing to talk about this stuff. The majority of sex abuse experience is not reported because it's too complicated. Like I said before, the cops quiz you, they question you, it's about your private part. It's just a nightmare, and you don't want to relive it, and you want to forget it, and you don't want to talk about it. It's too upsetting to talk about. So that's just a reality. When somebody describes the experience the way that Dr. Ford did, with a lot of ancillary details that just tend to support the specific narrative about the sexual abuse, but also the peripheral details that just lend credibility to the story. Her affect and what she said, the substance of what she said and the way she said it, just made her extremely credible. Now, does that mean that he absolutely did it and that anytime somebody comes forward with a credible allegation, guilty until proven innocent? That's a problem. And that's been raised, and that's a legitimate question. Every other time it's innocent until proven guilty, but in this situation you're guilty until proven innocent? That's not fair. It isn't fair. It's complicated because I also stand by what I just said. Overwhelming majority of times, credible allegations, they occurred. We have a responsibility to make sure that even though overwhelming majority of times it's true, what if this isn't? The best way to destroy a human being is to make an allegation like this. You're screwed. And people assume you're guilty until proven innocent. I'm screwed. It's not fair. It isn't. So we do have to figure out what can we do to make sure this isn't one of those times when it isn't true. It's hard. It's difficult. Because clearly, if you believe Dr. Ford, you don't believe Judge Kavanaugh. And either he blacked out and didn't remember it, or he remembers it but can't admit it. So that's a problem. Next piece of the problem, and again, anybody that heard me, wait till the end. If you did this, and in this situation it applies to Judge Kavanaugh, but it could apply to anybody else. It could apply to you or me. This is going to kill my career if I admit this. More, I would say more, I think I'm going to say even more than that, but maybe it's not more than that. My parents don't think of me like this. My wife doesn't think of me like this. My kids don't think of me like this. If I admit this occurred, it's a lot more at stake here than my career. What will my wife, my kids, my parents, my neighbors, my friends, my colleagues, the world think of me as a human being? I have to deny this. I have to. And I can't live with myself thinking that I did this, right? The problem is, if you didn't do it, you're going to be just as outraged and say no also. So is this an example of he's saying it because he has to say no, because for him to admit this would be the end? Or is he outraged because I've been falsely accused and you've ruined my life, I didn't do it? How do you tell the difference? It's complicated.
Do you think we will ever know the truth?
We're literally taping this the day after that Trump agreed to authorize the FBI to do the investigation. So we'll see what comes of it. And I don't know. I don't know. It's a heck of a dilemma because by definition, one is telling the truth and one isn't.
Right.
And if you really believe one, then you're not believing the other. And it's terrible.
Yeah.
And then of course the sideshow here is all the politics. And, this is what McConnell and all the Republicans did a year and a half ago when Barack was going to, and now the Democrats, and it all is, and the world we live in right now is tribal and all that stuff. It's a real problem. Let me say a couple of other things, though, that I think are a little bit related. That's a bad statement about our times. And then just the reality that we have to live with. When I worked at Susquehanna Valley Home, right after college, when I first met your father, in 1972, I was a child care worker, and I lived in the house with boys 8 to 11. And they had all kinds of issues, and some of them were real, even though they were only 8 to 11. So let's remind people, we're talking about kids. Some of them had been getting into trouble and were kind of, kids out on the street that were tough kids, and other kids were had psychiatric issues and all the rest. When it came time to go to bed, they still wanted to get a hug and a kiss, and they would jump on your lap. So that tough thug that you saw outside was a kid.
Right.
In 1976, or in those days, 1972, I could put him on my lap and give him a hug and a kiss. I don't know if I could do that now. Because we live in a world now where we've become so conscious of sex abuse and things that can happen that we need to build in protections to make sure that doesn't happen. There's a little bit of a cost to it. So it totally makes sense.
Yeah.
For example, in 1972 at a daycare center, you could go to the bathroom and one of the people that works at the daycare center could go in with you. You're a little kid, 2 years old. You're learning how to be toilet trained, or 3, whatever it might be, 4 years old. I had all the daycare scandals, can't do that. So either 2 people have to go into the bathroom with you, or you have to keep the door open. So the sense of privacy has changed. It's, I guess it's the cost of trying to address this stuff, and it's hard. We wrestle with it as a society. To what extent there are legal things we need to do, to what extent we can legislate stuff, to what extent we can have new guidelines and new laws to follow to make sure that bad things don't happen. But on the other hand, then some of the good stuff might not be able to happen either.
Right.
Let me give you one little story that occurred to me recently that was really upsetting. I was at the mall. I may have told you the story. I was at we live in Rockland County, the Palisades Center. I was going to buy something, and that day it was somewhat rainy, so I had a raincoat on, trench coat. Not a good thing. It brings up, memories of some, dirty old guy or some weird guy in a trench coat, hanging at the mall, right? I was just going to buy something at the mall, so I'm near the escalator. And I'm about to go up the escalator, and there's a little girl, probably 7, 8, 9 years old. She's kind of playing with the escalator. And you know how the escalator, what you hold on to moves, right? And she's pushing, she's playing with it like it's moving along. So as I'm going up the escalator, I said, "Keep doing that. I got to get the escalator to go to the top," right? I was pretending that she was making the escalator move so I can get to the top. And I went to the top. I go into a store, and about 2-3 minutes later, 4 minutes later, quickly, a guy comes up to me, goes right in my face, and starts cursing me and yelling and screaming at the top of his lungs. He thought I was molesting his kid, that I said something inappropriate, something. Right? Now, I never touched her. I mean, she was over here, I was over here. So there was lack of physical contact, and I never stopped. I just went up the escalator. So it wasn't even kind of close, like, if I'd gone over and put my arm around her or slapped her 5 or something, it would probably look even worse. This was like, what is he talking about, right? Yeah. And I said, "What are you talking about?" He was so angry, and I had the feeling that if I said anything else, he would have punched me, or I don't know what he would have done. And so he just said, "You're a pedophile, and if you ever go near my kid again, blah, blah, blah," and he stormed out of the room. So a few things. Number one, if he had called security, I would have been presumed guilty. And even after there would have been a conversation, unless somebody else heard us, and said, the guy just said, keep moving it so he can go up. If nobody else heard, and I don't know that anybody else heard us. So we live in a time where people can jump to conclusions. Now, who knows what was going on in the mind of this guy? I didn't even see him near his kid. I assume it was his daughter. I don't know. We live in a time where people jump to conclusions, and you could be accused of stuff, and it's scary. It's scary, and we're going to have to sort. That's what happens when we talk about things publicly. We make progress. We have made progress around the area of sexual abuse, but there are other things that come along the way that we need to further address and figure out a way to get better at. There's no question that although I don't know that we're necessarily preventing a lot of child sexual abuse, I don't know if we're absolutely primary prevention, like people that would have molested won't molest. There may be some that will get help before they ever do it. I don't think that'll happen a lot. What I do think will happen is more kids will come forward sooner than they would have in the past. Mm-hmm. So instead of being abused 25 times before they finally come forward, maybe it only occurs once or twice or 3 times, and they tell somebody because we talk about this stuff more. There may be messages that we're sending, I hope so, to the world, that we have an open institution, that if you work as a big brother and big sister at this organization, we want you to know that we talk about this stuff to volunteers and to the kids, and if there's ever anything we want them to come forward, maybe that will prevent some stuff from occurring. I think we've done a good job. I think we're getting better, but we have a long way to go. And whether it's seeing a person in a mall and jumping to conclusions, or trying to weigh an allegation against somebody years later, that in no way makes it not true. It doesn't automatically make it true.
Yeah.
But most of the time it is, and we still have an obligation to make sure this is one of those exceptions. So it's complicated.
Yeah. It is complicated. Very complicated.
Yeah.
Well, Al, this has been a great conversation. I have just a couple more questions. I'd like to talk a little baseball.
Baseball.
A game we both love. What is it about baseball that attracted you as a young guy?
Baseball. So I think part of it is if you grow up in the United States and in New York, and I was born in 1950, so I was Mickey Mantle, Roger Maris, and my father was a Yankees fan. So all that stuff's relevant, right? The fact that it's something to do with your dad. Number 2, in the United States, bats and balls and a mitt. And baseball could then become stickball and related kinds of things like baseball. It's easy. It's part of our culture, although it's changed a little bit, I think. But certainly in those days, that baseball was the national sport, right? The national pastime. I guess it's changed, but easy to do. Didn't need a lot of people. Cheap. Bond with your dad and your friends. When I would come to Binghamton and play ball in the street with you, that was just a first cousin of baseball, and throwing the ball in the street and having a catch. It's one of the things that in my generation was unfair to girls. Girls' sports wasn't as reinforced as it is today. Yeah. I made my friends playing ball. That's how I got. That's the way I socialized with everybody. We'd play ball, 8 o'clock in the morning, Saturday morning, up to the top of the street, stickball, baseball, whatever, softball, play all day, have friends. It was a way to be with people. I was, of course, in those days, you also, in politics and sports and everything else, you didn't know certain stuff. Like Mickey Mantle was my hero. Right. I didn't know what he was doing. We didn't know what JFK was doing. We didn't know what other. Nowadays, everything kind of kills it. It kind of kills the buzz. And I don't mean it in an alcoholic way, sure. But an alcohol way. But sports is great, and it's a great way to be active, to be social, to be friends, to connect to your family.
And the Yankees clinched home field advantage for the wild card last night.
They did.
What's your prediction? By the time this airs, it will have already happened.
Yeah. So as a lifelong Yankees fan, you know, one of the sad things about getting older and more mature, when they lost, I couldn't sleep. Now I can sleep. I kind of miss the fact that,
Right.
you know, I have it in
passion.
perspective. You know, your father would always say to me, so what, does your life change if they lose the game? Your father would say this to me all the time. Of course, he was just saying it to himself because he got upset. He tried to convince himself he wasn't upset. Anyway, I actually, I'm a big-time Yankees fan. It's kind of, it bums me out that they're one win away from winning 100 games and they're not going to finish first in their division. I don't think they're the best team. So I'm hoping that we catch a wave. I'm also a hockey fan, and in hockey in particular, emotional stuff can drive a team. Given that they're a high level of skill, emotion can really matter. It seems like it happens less in baseball, but there may be an element of that. So the Yankee guys have just come back from injuries. You know, I'm hoping that
Get hot at the right time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that does matter. If you get
Yes.
hot at the right time in sports,
Yep.
it can change everything. So you may not have been the best team all year long, although you're pretty darn good if you're, you know, the third best record in baseball. But if you get hot at the right time,
And it could work the other way too. If you get in a slump,
yeah.
you could be done.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I'm optimistic, but we'll see.
We'll see.
I would call us an underdog.
Okay. So your wife, your wonderful wife, Lynn, is a force
Oh
to
yes,
reckon
wonderful. Love you, honey.
with. She's a force to reckon with. She too is an athlete.
Yes.
Rose to the top of the education
Very
system.
proud of her.
She started as a teacher, a principal, and a superintendent.
Right.
So my question now is, what is in the water in Westchester County that, honestly, like you both have, you started
We
as
both-
a
I was a
social
social
worker,
worker, she was a
and
teacher.
you CEO. She started as a teacher.
Right.
That's great chemistry. And it doesn't happen by circumstance. I mean, you both worked really hard and had really high goals. So I guess the point is, you can never set your goals too high, right? Because it's there for the taking if you do the things you need to do to get there.
So I'm going to give you yes with an asterisk. And it's a big asterisk. And I think a little bit of this is about Lynn and I, and a little of this is about the times. If you had asked me when I was a social worker in the clinic, did I want to be the CEO? Absolutely not. I didn't aspire to become the CEO. You know, I make jokes about becoming an administrative nerd. That's how I viewed it. I like being a clinician. If you had asked Lynn when she was a teacher, did she ever want to become the principal or the superintendent? Absolutely not. I think that was a little bit who we were, and I'll get back to that in a second. I also think times have changed a little bit. Well, let's go back to us, and then we'll go back to the times. So for me, and I think this is mostly true. It's going to sound like, oh, isn't that nice? But I think this is mostly true. I really tried to be as good as I could be as a therapist. And I didn't really think too far ahead about I want to go become the head of the agency. I had never thought about that. I mean, I had no interest in it. I think the same is true of Lynn. She wanted to be a really good teacher. I also tried to not make decisions about, my decision-making thinking was about a particular job and being happy, not about I want to make a lot more money. So if I liked doing what I was doing at WJCS, I didn't make a lot of money, but I wanted to still do that, I started a private practice to help me get enough money so I could still stay doing what I wanted to do and stay at this agency. You know, Lynn tutored if we needed extra money. It wasn't like, oh, I love being a teacher, but I want to go become a principal so I can make more money. No, I want to be a teacher, and if I need more money, I'll find other ways to do that. In the end, it worked for us. In the end, when I did change my mind, it was only after I started the Child Sex Abuse Treatment Center and created a program. I was not only working as a clinician in the program I created, I started to like creating programs. I like that. So my mind changed about what I wanted to do. But that's when it occurred.
Okay.
Lynn got recruited to become a principal. They called her up and said, she says, well, I'm not.
They saw something in her.
Yeah. So I think making the right decisions for the right reasons for us. Again, I don't want to sound sophomoric or like, oh, goody goody. I wasn't, I'm not. But it just worked. So making the right decisions at the right time for the right reasons for us worked. I think most of the time that's true. And so that's how it happened. And then at some point, but I was into my career. They opened up jobs to be like a head of all the clinics. At that moment, I said, I kind of want to do that. At that moment, I said, okay, now if I want to do that, where is my ultimate goal? But it was only at that moment. That was like 15 years in, something like that. Number 2 point, and that has to do with our society, the world. So I was at a place for 42 years. I like that concept. It's not right or wrong, it worked for me. I can absolutely understand that people would say, I want to work here for 10 years and do something else. Nowadays, I think, and I think this is true, I don't think I'm making this up about it being a generational change. I think it's true. In general, I think people are more impatient about their career. Hey, I've been doing a great job for 2 years, how come I'm not the CEO? Right. You know, it took me 22 years to become that.
Putting in your time.
Putting in your time. I think people today, I'm not sure, but I think generations today, hey, I should get paid much more money.
Yeah, they want that instant gratification.
I don't know if that's what it is exactly, but some version of I should be rewarded more quickly. So I should get paid more money more quickly. If I told you what my salary was when I was running the Child Sex Abuse Treatment Center, you wouldn't believe me, it was so low. That's the way it was okay. Times have changed and that's fine. So I think it's a little bit Lynn's personal way we did things, but also it's a little generational. I think, if I were 22 today, would I be a little different about this? I don't know. It's, who the heck knows?
Isn't that the way the world's moving? Like everything is stronger, faster.
It seems that way.
Bigger, better.
It seems that way, and again, I'm an old goat, so I have a little bit of a bias. I think that's good and it's bad.
Yeah.
I think it's good and it's bad. Look, having voicemail and having email allows us to be much more productive, get things done much more quickly. If without voicemail and email, making a decision and having something happen just takes more time. Mm-hmm. It used to take days, now it takes 2 minutes.
Which may not have been a bad thing in some cases, where you need that time to...
I think sometimes that's right. Look, it's more efficient, and we get. And I'm a little bit of a hypocrite in the following way. If I want to know something, I want to know it now, right? I'm getting used to this internet stuff, right? So I Google something, there's the answer. Or if I'm not sure about something, when I was at WJCS, I would send an email, and it would be nice to get an answer right away. On the other hand, I don't want to be bothered 24/7.
Right.
And I don't think it's good.
Yeah.
I don't think it's good. I think people need off time. I think people need to know that they can't be on all the time. And yet, having people accessible to me all the time and being able to get...
Right.
So we're going to have to sort that out.
Yeah.
Governing the internet, we're going to have to figure out a way to do that. I mean, how do you do that? I don't even know, but we're going to have to figure it out. Technology gets ahead of us. We start to catch up. This whole issue about Twitter and Facebook and how do you stop bad guys from contaminating it. The notion that somebody could go on a website and find out how to build a bomb or get a gun out of a printer is scary.
Yeah.
So have a lot of great things happen because of progress? Heck yeah. Wonderful, great, terrific things. Whether it's in medicine or just daily life, it's fabulous. I don't know, what the heck are we going to do with this technology about driverless cars?
Yeah.
I love the
It's coming.
fact.
Autonomous cars, it's coming.
It's coming. but it's scary. So I like the fact I got my cruise control. I thought it wasn't working right because I set it at 65. You know, I'm on Route 17, and I wouldn't set it at 1 over because it's a speed limit 65, Raj.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Oh, I know.
Yeah. So I set it at 65, and it's at 60. Well, I must be doing it wrong. And then I realized it says, well, no, the car in front of you. Well, 5 years ago, if you set it 65, it's 65.
Right.
If the car in front of you is going 50, you're going into it.
That's right.
Those are great things.
Yeah.
Driverless cars, geez, I don't know.
Al, you're a storyteller, which is wonderful. You told a lot of great stories today. How important do you think it is for people to find their own voice and really become what I call the hero in their own story, their life?
I couldn't have said it better. Perfect. Yeah.
It's important.
It's really, really important. And we all have different voices. We all sing at different octaves. We all sing at different paces. Some like blues, and some like rock and roll, and some like jazz. Try and be as best that you can be. Find your voice, your rhythm. Have good values. Access that sponge cake in you. Never lose sight of it. Bring in all the toppings you can get in your life to make that sponge cake taste even sweeter.
Awesome. Quickly, tell us about Mahou.
You want to hear about Mahou? All right. This is going to bore most of your audience, the 3 people that are listening. The greatest dog that ever lived.
Why?
Really smart. So I got him at college. He was, I think, the first dog that was legally allowed at Harper, Binghamton. That may be lore and may not be true, but I think so.
We may have to check into that.
Yeah. I shouldn't have said this publicly because now we'll find out or something. Anyway, I literally could walk across a highway without a leash, and I would not be concerned at all. He was just really not obedient in the sense that I trained him just because he was smart and trainable, and he's also lovable and sweet. He was just a great dog, and he never spent a day in a kennel because all of the people in my life, my family, my friends and stuff, I'm not making this up, and you've known Mahou. The reason he never spent days in kennels is because when we went away, people would say, bring him with you, or we'll take care of him. And can I just tell my one story about, this was I got him in 1971, I was still at college, and in those days, Frisbees were becoming popular, but you didn't see dogs catching Frisbees much, but there were some. Mahou was good at that. And so I liked throwing Frisbees, and Mahou liked catching Frisbees. In fact, I could teach Mahou a new trick by telling him we'll play Frisbee afterwards. It was as good as a treat.
Yeah.
So one weekend, our friends in Washington say, why don't you guys come down for the weekend, Lynn and I, and of course bring Mahou. So we traveled down to Washington, and we're there. It's a beautiful weekend. It's in the spring. It's probably in the low 70s. It's gorgeous. So we decide to go to the park. So we go to the park and decide to give Mahou a workout. And I'm on and he's on. I mean, we're having a day. But I'm on the side. I'm minding my own business. And just the 4 of us and Mahou. So I throw the Frisbee really far. He was a collie shepherd. He was not a little tiny dog. And I'd throw it, he'd run, he'd jump up in the air, he'd catch the Frisbee and then come back and bring it to me so Daddy could throw it again. All of a sudden I start to notice that people are watching. So now, remember Barney Fife, right? So now I'm kind of, oh yeah, this is great. You know, I'm like the father of Lassie or a Rin Tin Tin, or yeah, this is great. So my motive initially was just to quietly do this thing, but now kind of into it, you know. So there I am, and so now people are starting to, so now I'm on the 6th or 7th throw, and I wing it, and run, up in the air, and people are going nuts. People are clapping, so I'm just wow, this is the greatest. I'm like at Madison Square Garden, you know. It's great, you know, where I'm like, you know, hitting the home run in the World Series. So my last throw, I fling it. It's a good throw, man. It's a really good throw, and Mahou is on his game. He runs, catches it, gets the Frisbee, and he's about 10 feet away as he's coming back to me. There's a guy sitting on a blanket sunning himself. He lifts his leg and pees all over the guy's back. Really? The greatest dog that ever lived? The greatest trainer that ever lived? Really?
You forgot to train him on that one.
You know, I guess the guy had his shirt. Now I'm making excuses, right? There is no excuse, but I think the guy had his shirt off, had like a little urea or something, sweat or something, or the dog was just nervous. I mean, he just wasn't prepared to be. So then, of course, you know, I have to hit him on the tush a little bit to kind of, because everybody's watching, you know, and I don't want to, you know, it's being pee off or pissed on, right? I mean, it was both. And it was very, very funny. But again, Barney Fife.
Yeah.
Don't get too ahead of yourself.
That's
it was
right.
very, very funny.
Good lesson.
Yeah.
Well, this has been great, Al, and you've lived, and you still have a lot of life to live, but you're retired now. You've lived a wonderful life. You've helped so many people. You started this conversation out by saying you got into your career because you wanted to help people, and it's wonderful. What do you want your legacy to be, ultimately?
Oh my goodness. My legacy. Guy had integrity, good values, loved his family, did some good stuff.
Awesome. Al Trager, thank you. It's been wonderful.
Thanks.
Thank you for tuning into American Real. Be sure to visit our website, americanreal.tv, or search for us on iTunes or YouTube for past episodes. While you're there, please rate us or leave us a review. You can also connect with me directly on Instagram or Facebook, or by emailing roger@americanreal.tv. Now, if you're interested in starting your own podcast, join me in Podcast Your Passion. I'll take you through my 8-week course where I'll mentor you to build a world-class podcast. I'm only taking on a small group of people who want to share their passion through broadcasting, where I'll have you up on iTunes and YouTube within weeks so you can podcast your passion. Click on the link below for more information.